Welcome back to Passionate World Talk Radio. Educate, enlighten, entertain, and also cool your heels with Lillian. Heard every Tuesday evening from 8 to 9 p.m. on AMFM247.com. And this morning, our special guest on Cool Your Heels is Chuck Mitchell, who's going to talk about a survey his company did about the upcoming recession and the lack of talent shortage in the business world. So good morning, Chuck. How are you?
Pretty good, Lillian. No complaints on this end. Global warming as it is in New York, we were 60-something yesterday. So.
We were 70-something in Philadelphia, so we beat you by about 10 degrees. And you saw all the girls out in their short shorts and the guys out practically stripped. But I was cold. Maybe it's because I'm older than they are.
I'm with you on that.
So, a coming recession. They've been muttering about it for a year. What are the chances?
Well, that's the interesting part about it, right? So we at the Conference Board, one of our bread and butters is economic forecasting. And although we do see global growth slowing and out through the decade, it's still growth at about 2.5%. So this recession fear, right? So this, what is the top concern for CEOs is this fear of recession, but the numbers don't actually point to an imminent recession. So there's a psychology play here, and one of the dangers behind this fear of recession is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will, that we're already starting to see some slowdown in business expenditures. Part of another concern from our survey is cost reduction within the organization. So although we're projecting and predicting, global growth, albeit slow global growth, CEOs still fear this recession, and they may talk themselves or act themselves into one, and that's the danger here.
They have a saying in the paranormal world that if you think there's a monster out there and you talk about it and you create it enough psychologically, you can will it into life.
And that's, that is a threat here. That's a real danger. One of the things that we do see in our consumer confidence index, we've been doing that for several decades now, and we also do a CEO confidence measure here in the U.S., and we see this disparity where consumer confidence is at near record highs and CEO confidence is at near record lows. So there's this huge disparity in the outlook, at least for the consumers. They're seeing the glass more than half full, and CEOs are seeing the glass less than half full, and something's going to have to give. I mean, one of the hopefully that the business confidence will rise to meet consumer expectations. But the thing to keep an eye on is the consumer notion, the consumer spending. If that starts to dip, if they feel that things like trade issues and trade disputes, global political instability starts to impact their personal lives, their jobs, their incomes, that confidence starts to erode and starts to meet that low business confidence, then we may be indeed in for a recession. So it's something to keep an eye on. The U.S. economy and much of the global economy these days are driven by consumers and consumer spending. And as long as they're confident, as long as they're spending, that'll keep us out of a recession.
Now, do you think a domino theory may happen? For example, in England, they're still trying to get their trade up and off the shelf since they've broken away from the rest of the European Union, and they're trying to come back on their own terms. I do know what's happening in England. Do you think that maybe some of the problems they're having there in terms of pharmaceuticals and healthcare could affect the general public satisfaction or dissatisfaction and have that leak over across to us?
I think a contagion effect that you're talking about is highly unlikely. We have that vote that Brexit is indeed going ahead, and maybe certainly by the end of this month, by the end of January. But I think a lot of the issues already been baked in. You're not going to see an impact of Brexit on the UK economy probably for another year or so, because they're going to go through basically an interim period until the impacts of whatever trade deal that they negotiate with the EU comes into effect. So in essence, I think even after the 31st, if there's a formal break, it's going to be kind of business as usual for a while until the details of the trade pact custom union is all worked out. Whether that can jump the pond, so to speak, and in the U.S., it's highly unlikely. I mean, we're still predicting, about a 1% growth in the UK in the next year, about 1.5 in Europe. It's slow, but it's and there's some things that could tip certainly the UK into recession. But at this point in time, that I think the impact of that and the negative impacts will be localized in the UK.
Okay, let's switch back to U.S. politics. Do you feel that the upcoming elections may have something to do with the consumers' belief that everything is still status quo and they won't have anything to worry about?
I don't know if it's linked exactly to the election. We're still a year away, basically from the presidential election. So much of it comes down to the consumer's personal sentiment. I think politics aside, or all politics are local, or maybe all politics are related to my employment and my income. We're starting to see wages tick up, especially in blue-collar occupations. Employment, the labor market is the tightest it's been in decades. Although there is some softness in the manufacturing side, but I don't. At this point in time, I don't think that there's a big concern around the political aspect of the economy. Maybe as we get closer to the election, once there's a clear Democratic nominee and a clear choice, that may start to impact consumer sentiment and business sentiment. But I think at this point in time, we're still too far away.
All right, so we won't talk about the trade war because that's a roller coaster ride for anybody. You said also that your survey found that CEOs were fearing that there was going to be a shortage of talent in the business sector. Haven't we always had that, though?
Probably not as intense as it is at this point in time, and there's so many things that contribute to it, not the least of which is the whole demographic notion. I mean, the U.S. is getting older. The whole supply of the workforce is shrinking, right? The working age population, and that's putting additional pressure, especially when we have low unemployment rates as we have now. When you look 3, 5, 8 years down the road, the actual size of the workforce itself is shrinking. You have and that in itself starts to create a lot more pressure. There's just not enough people to do the jobs. I mean, if you look at the latest data on manufacturing, I think there's almost 500,000 manufacturing jobs that are unfilled.
Yeah.
And part of that has to do with the demographic side of this. Also, when we talk about talent, we have to relate the notion of skills, and with automation, with manufacturing jobs becoming more technology oriented. It's not so much working on the line doing rivets as it is controlling the machines that are doing the rivets, right? So that even a manufacturing job now has a higher skill demand than it did 5, 8, 10 years ago. And that's part of the shortage, is the training and skill side of it.
Do you think our current system then of education, of going to college, should be changed a bit then with what they're really trying? I mean, we can only need so many lawyers, for example, or insurance salesmen, but I know we have a shortage of doctors, and we always have a shortage of nurses and trained orderlies. Caregivers, the jury's still out, but I do know that, like you said, the manufacturing jobs, half of them are unfilled. Is it because our educational system is not really educating the kids that are coming up to be properly attuned to the new technology?
We've done some work that looks at the expectations of the business community vis-a-vis the expectation stroke output of the education community, and yeah, there is a mismatch. I think that that there's a lack of focus on the whole notion of STEM, of the science education in high schools and elementary schools. But also, interesting, what we're seeing is that the labor market being so tight, is that a lot of organizations are filling jobs that once required a college education or a college degree with high school or some college applicants. That there's a focus in a lot of organizations. I think, just think of Amazon spending, was it $400 million on training its existing workforce, right? And a lot of our organizations, a lot of our member organizations here at the Conference Board, we see them really focusing on evolving their existing talent. So the assumption is that coming out of high school or coming out of even an associate's degree at community college level, that additional training is going to be required, especially as technology continues to evolve. Those skills are outdated. If you graduate with some certain technology skills, in 18 months those skills are outdated. So the focus on a lot of organizations, a lot of big corporations, is evolving their existing talent base, giving them the time and the resources to really improve their skills, which benefits not only the individual but also the company. And but it's not just a U.S. problem; it's a global problem, right? So
yeah.
India is a great example, right? So Infosys, the big tech consulting firm in India, will hire 3,000 or 4,000 programmers and engineers out of Indian universities, and for the first 6 to 8 months, they put them back in school. But it's an Infosys school that's focused specifically on training certain skills and certain programming skills, certain engineering skills that'll benefit Infosys. But they feel that the cadre that comes out of the universities isn't ready for the kind of work that they're going to need to do on a day-to-day basis. So it's not just a U.S. issue; it's a global issue.
It's a global issue. Do we find that we still have a big brain drain from kids coming over to the States to be educated or skilled in the technology they need, and then taking it back to their own countries?
Yes, I think that's very much an issue. Although we've seen foreign enrollments in U.S. universities start to take a hit in the last few years. But, I've spent quite a bit of time in China in the last few years. I was based in Hong Kong for a while, up until 2018. And it's interesting, in China, you're seeing a lot of U.S. university-educated Chinese wanting to come back to China. They feel that there's opportunity. It's kind of like the old Wild West, if you will, that there's an entrepreneurial spirit in China that they feel that their skills can be taken advantage of. So they call them sea turtles, those that have been in the West for many years and are now slowly migrating back to China. And that's, there's a whole host of issues. There's the positive side on the Chinese welcoming back and providing opportunity, and there's a negative side of the trade and political tensions with China at this point in time, where a lot of immigrants feel unwelcome. So it's kind of the perfect storm, if you will, for immigrants looking to return home, especially Chinese immigrants, and have some opportunity.
Well, I suspect with their new immigration policy in place, they would feel better going home anyway.
It's interesting. There's annual surveys that look at that poll Chinese undergraduate and Chinese graduate university students as to what companies that they would like to work for when they graduate. And for many years, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, it was dominated by multinationals, European, Japanese, American companies that were operating in China. And that list now is kind of flipped. There's, that the Chinese companies probably make up about half of the most desirable employers among Chinese graduates. So, to your point, that they indeed may want to go home anyway, regardless of the opportunity here, because they see there's more comfort, obviously, culturally, and there's opportunity.
And I think they're more protected there, too. I mean, their political system compared to ours sucks, but if you've been brought up that way since you were a kid, you've been pretty much brainwashed by then.
Well, yeah, but there's also, Communist Party aside, if you will, right? I mean, the way that they govern is one aspect, but it's the whole cultural aspect,
yes.
The notion of collective good, right? That's so ingrained in a lot of Asian cultures, that it's respect for the family, respect for hierarchy, respect for age and wisdom and experience. That has nothing to do with the governing the status or governing practices of the Communist Party. It's ingrained in the cultures. It's ingrained in China. It's ingrained in Japan. It's ingrained in Singapore. It's ingrained in Taiwan. So that's one aspect.
Well, I think their education system, even in Europe, is different and has a different viewpoint, perspective from parents wanting their kids to get a good education. I mean, look at the immigrants who used to come into this country, and what was the number one priority was for their kids to get a good education. That's not so much anymore, not from what I can tell.
What, on the immigrant side, you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, it's always been that way with the Hispanics. It's always been that way with all the cultures that have come in. It was rammed down my throat. If you're going to get ahead, you need a good education. Go out there and get it, because you can get it for free here. You don't have to send your kid off to a fancy school. You can get a good education.
Well, I don't think that's changed so much. I think in pursuit of a better life, that cultures, especially Asian cultures, recognize and focus on the importance of education. Some of it's a different, especially among Asian cultures, it's a different approach to what education is, if you will, right? I think what makes the U.S. more admired, or its education system more admired, is this notion of critical thinking, of problem solving, of working in teams. Very few schools, if there's any left in the U.S., when a kid comes into first grade, sits at a desk, right? They sit, at least it was true for my children, they sit at tables and they approach problems in teams. And that's the way, that's where ultimately, when you get to the workforce, it's not about individual performance. It's about being able to perform in teams.
And that makes a difference. Do you believe that artificial intelligence may be a big competitor for jobs here in the States?
I think it's the job. Will it be a job killer, a net job killer?
The thing is, the way I look at it is that artificial intelligence can take over doing jobs that you would have regular people do. So if you can't find the talent or the people to oversee the machines, then why don't you have another machine overseeing the machines to get the work done?
That's almost dystopian, the robot apocalypse, right?
Yes, well, I was raised on science fiction. What can I say?
There you go. No, I think that what artificial intelligence and cognitive, computer and machine learning, it changes the nature of the job, right? It changes how humans have to interact with those machines. It may not necessarily, it'll create new types of jobs, right? I think it's interesting to see how it changes how a function performs within an organization. So I've done some work with European and U.S. Procurement groups, right? So they're running the supply chain, if you will, within large corporations, and when they look out 5 to 8 years, that they see the nature of their job, what they do every day actually changes, because things like standard contracts will be negotiated through AI, right, computer to computer, to maximize the benefits for both sides. And at this point in time, that contract negotiation is fundamental of the daily operation of procurements, right?
Yeah.
But that'll all be done by machines. So what does that do? That means that those that are doing those contract negotiations now kind of have to get involved more in vendor management and in relationship management. It changes the nature of the job. It doesn't eliminate the job necessarily, but it changes what they do.
And I guess it would change the education of how someone would be trained to handle that. The reason why I ask is that there's a lot of AI now coming into the internet radio and regular radio stations. And there are radio stations that everything is set on automatic, i.e. by a software or a machine that pretty much dictates what happens during their 24/7 schedule during the day and also during the week.
Right.
So it's something that you may be laughing at now, but from the way I look at it, that is a lot of things that a lot of the smaller internet radio stations are looking into, bringing AI into their sphere to be more competitive with the big boys.
Yeah, I think one of the things that one has to be careful about, and we see that, in a lot of artificial intelligence operations are starting to come into the human resources function in big corporations. But there's a difference between artificial intelligence machines that are learning and able to make decisions and automation. Right? And I think you're talking a little bit more about automation.
Yeah,
which has been around, since
has been around for a long time. You do see the AIs coming in now through some of my emails and everything, asking me if I would be interested in considering something like this. And frankly, no, I can't. But I'd much rather have human brain power because I think it gives people an opportunity to keep on learning and educating themselves. Whereas if you have artificial intelligence coming in, I think in some ways you are making it more difficult for a person to go and continue educating themselves or retraining themselves for whatever newer jobs are coming along.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of movies that, talk about the humans losing most of their functions, right? WALL-E, right, was one. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration. Again, it's kind of a bit of the robot apocalypse. There's nothing that replaces human-to-human interaction, right? And it's interesting when you talk about, like home health care aides, right? I mean, that where the demand for jobs is going to remain is at the lower end of things like, not that I'm saying that it's an easy job by any means, but home health care where you need that personal interaction, personal day to day, and the other shortages at the very, very high end where the individual is working out the algorithms for the AI that's going to come up with a playlist based on an audience data, right? I mean, those are the two extremes, and I think all that territory in the middle is going to require some retraining, but also again, you can't replace the human to human contact. That's what makes us different.
That's true, and we want to keep that. So, Chuck, please give a summary of what you foresee or what your survey has forecasted for the next 3 to 5 years, which I guess is standard for any business plan you have to submit to a bank to get a loan from. And any thoughts? Yeah,
I guess what corporations and what businesses and what our members are really preparing for is how disruptive technologies is going to impact their organization. And, it starts with this urgent need to start trying to change your business model, how you go to market. I think the big thing that we see as a trend is that companies are getting away from this notion of a product orientation, right? And going into adding a service to that product. So let me give you an example. Johnny Walker Red Label whiskey, right?
Right.
So there's a bottle. It sits on a shelf, and now it's a smart bottle that Diageo is producing, right? So not only, right, when it goes off the shelf, it informs the store about its inventory, But when you take it home and it's linked to your cell phone and you open the bottle, it will send you cocktail recipes, right? So that is going from just selling a bottle of whiskey to actually providing that bottle of whiskey along with a service, i.e. the cocktail recipes on how you want to use that product. And that's the trend that we're starting to see. That, I think, is going to be the big trend, is adding a service element to an existing product. We're seeing a lot of organizations starting to organize their work nexus around teams, right? Agile, fluid, mobile teams that are based on skills. Some companies are ending job descriptions and are just hiring skills, and those skills are moving around between project teams, right, that are aligned with the overall business strategy. So I think those are two of the big notions: the servitization of products, and then how work is going to be executed within organizations. It's all going to be around teams.
I think it's a good idea. I was a professional temporary for 10 years, and one thing that made me invaluable was that they could put me anywhere, and I could always pull it off.
Right.
Not everybody could do that because they never really bothered to learn anything outside of their job description. And
right.
I think it's a good idea to have somebody who, as part of a team, can walk into any position, any job, and be able to either maintain it or even take it up a notch because they made themselves available to materials that would make them more valuable to their company. And that's what it really is. You're a value.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think one of the traits for any individual of any age is this notion of being a continuous learner, right? I mean, in this time, in a digital era, and with so much change around us, that you need to keep personally, you have a personal responsibility to continue to learn, to continue to make yourself valuable by broadening your depth of knowledge, right? By expanding what you can do with that knowledge. And as you say, as in your case, right? You walk in a team and you can move around from team to team and make a good contribution. And there's a personal responsibility element in this for sure.
Yeah, I think so. Anything else you would like to add? Tell them where they can find you on the World Wide Web and how they can get any other type of information from your company.
Yeah, we're on the web. We're at www.conference-board.org. We're a not-for-profit. We're 102 years old, member organization. We have no axe to grind. We're an honest, unbiased data organization, if you will. And there's a lot of good elements open to the public on our website. We do the consumer confidence. We've been doing it for more than 50 years. We do the leading economic indicators. We have a whole series of data, plus a lot of interesting takes on the human resource side, corporate governance, sustainability. So it's all there on our website.
Okay, thank you very much, Chuck. And for those who want to listen to this interview all over again, you can listen to it next Tuesday evening on AMFM247.com at 8 o'clock p.m. Cool Your Heels with Lillian. You can also find it at https://passionateworldtalkradio.com. Right-hand side menu, Cool Your Heels, click on it, and voila, you will see it there. You can also hear on iHeart and Spotify and Alexa and iTunes, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, we're on it. Just ignore Alexa. I'm not using it at the moment. And before we go away and stray, the Marquis de Halifax had this to say: in the late 17th century, as mankind is made, the keeping it in order is an ill-natured office. Thank you all very much for listening, and remember, until next time, thank you.